Thanks very much.
Thank you, Senator Scarr. Now, just a few from me before we finish up. I've been concerned for a while about the impact of ongoing regulatory change to the financial advice sector. I've had a brief chat in another forum with you about this, Mr. Longo. In particular, we've seen new regulatory burdens, we've seen new cost burdens on the financial advice sector, we've seen new educational requirements on the financial advice sector, and from that sector, I get continual feedback from a wide variety of participants that there is a degree of regulatory overload, regulatory fatigue, and that they feel under an extraordinary amount of pressure. It's causing businesses to respond in particular ways, perhaps not being able to continue with clients they've served for many, many decades, but who are potentially low-value clients because the regulatory burden has become too high. So I guess, Mr. Longo, do you have any views on that particular sector and ASIC's role in regulating it, and whether ASIC can proactively look at reducing the regulatory and cost burden on that sector?
No, it's a very significant and important question. For specifics, I'll ask Commissioner Press, but from my perspective, it's really important in order for consumers and investors to participate confidently in our financial markets, to be able to have access to advice they can afford and to advice they can understand and have ready access to. And it's no question that our system at the moment is complex, and there's a range of requirements that financial advisors have to comply with. And as we know, there have been a number of recent legislative changes coming out of the Royal Commission that have relevance to this problem as well. So for my part, I am concerned about this sector. I think it's really important that consumers have access to affordable advice, to financial services advice, and it will be one of my priorities to see what can be done to address that issue. All I would say in conclusion is that we do have, and there's a lot of litigation on this recently, the whole question of personal versus general advice went to the High Court. We do have a complex regime, and I think one of the challenges for ASIC and for policymakers is to figure out a way of making that regime more digestible and with the practical effect of consumers having access to affordable advice. Now, I know Commissioner Press has done a lot of work on this, and with the leave of the Chair, I might ask her to supplement my answer in case there are some additional points that would be of assistance to the committee.
Thank you, Chair Longo, and Chair, thank you for the question. I completely agree that it's a really important part of the Australian financial service system. As you know, we did a consultation into access to affordable advice recently, which closed, and we had over 480 submissions to that, which suggests that it's a very engaged industry and also a very important part of what we do. From that, there are a number of things that came out. There are certainly some things that we can do to make our regulatory requirements more that will be a matter of how we implement it. And also a number of legislative reforms that were proposed. We have passed those through Treasury. We understand that we know that there is a review into advice in the second half of next year, and I would expect that those regulatory and legislative changes that have been suggested by industry will be considered at that time, or potentially earlier by the Treasury, the government.
I think one of the challenges that I'm facing when talking to people in the industry is that they feel as if they are not getting the information and guidance they need to make high-quality decisions. One that's been raised with me recently has been requirements around using the term independent and whether that's been clearly defined and that it is being consistently applied across the financial advice sector. Is that something that's been communicated to ASIC. Have you provided guidance in respect to obligations under those new requirements to declare properly declare independence? Or to frame yourself as an independent?
The legislation around independence is relatively clear. If there are people, I have not heard any directly on those concerns. If there are concerns on the actual, or if there is a requirement for further guidance from us on those issues, I would encourage industry to talk to us about that. However, that is defined by the legislation, not by ASIC.
Okay. Well, I do have a particular case. I'm loath to mention company names in forums like this, so I'll take it to ASIC offline. But I do have a particular case where a financial advice firm owned by a group of super funds is declaring itself as independent, and small financial advisors see that as being an inconsistent application of the law. But I'm happy to bring you that offline unless you wish to make a comment.
Senator, I would probably prefer to take that offline, but I am aware we have looked at that situation, so I'm very happy to give you a briefing off.
Okay, that would be good. I'll thank you for response to my questions on notice from the last estimates round. I guess I'm still struggling a little bit to understand the difference between the increase in the ASIC funding levy that I am being told about by individual financial advisors in excess of 100% versus the, I guess, 29% that you, Commissioner, quoted, I believe it was at the last estimates round. Can you talk me through where that differential is coming about? What is the difference between the 29% and the 110, 112% that I'm hearing from financial advisors? How is that differential explained?
Senator, again, I would prefer to take that one on notice. The funding is quite complex and difficult to explain, and I'm not sure that I will be able to do it justice with the numbers right on the run. There are a lot of factors that are impacting the funding levy for advisors at the moment, of which we've talked about a number of them. I really don't think I could have, I don't think I have anything that's useful to say.
Okay. Also on notice then, could I get an explanation of the drivers behind the cost increase? I'm happy for you to take this on notice. My understanding is it's been put to some degree to increase in enforcement activity. So could I have a breakdown? Could I have a breakdown of the drivers behind the increase as well? I'm happy to do that as part of a private briefing or as a question on notice, whichever you would prefer. And perhaps if you could take this one on notice as well. So you won the High Court case last year against Westpac relating to superannuation funds who were positioning themselves as providing general advice. The High Court found that they were providing personal advice. Given that this issue related to super funds and ones that were operating on a general advice model, did financial advisors who provided personal advice to retail clients end up paying for any of the costs of that action?
I would need to take that on as well, Senator Brockman, as to bucket that funding went to and therefore where the costs will go back to.
We do have a formula in the cost recovery arrangements for how enforcement matters are allocated, and the formula is applied depending on the nature of the matter, and we could certainly provide that information.
I do have more questions, but in the interests of time and given that we are around half an hour behind schedule, I will leave it there. Once again, Mr Longo, thank you very much. I hope that wasn't too